Welcome to your iconic image. If you want to take control of your image and be a power player in your space, then this is the show for you. Here we will arm you with tools and information to help you grow your brand on purpose. I'm your host, Marlana Semenza, photographer and visual strategist. Now let's dive into today's episode. Noa Ronen encourages her clients to challenge the norm so they can break through mental blocks and create the life they desire. She spent 5 years being stuck by her perceived weakness before thinking differently and turning it into a strength. Welcome, Noa.
Hi there. So happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your story so we have some background.
Yeah, so people can hear even from the hi there that I'm not originally from the US. I moved to the US from Israel 15 years ago. And before the move, I worked in human resources, change management consulting, and was in executive roles. And with the move to the US for a job opportunity for my husband, and it was actually just to come for 2-3 years experience, and 15 years after we are citizens. But I knew that with two little kids moving to the other side of the world, it will take some time, but I thought that things will be easy and I will find a job and everything will be fine. But I was stuck for 5 years and I didn't find a job that was full. It wasn't like I didn't work, but I didn't work in something that felt fulfilling or felt like the experience I had in Israel. And a big chunk of it was that speaking felt as is my forte. I knew from a very early age that when I open my mouth and I speak, I can influence people. And suddenly, when I open my mouth, people see that I'm not from here, and they can see the gap in the language skills. And in my head, most important, it felt that my English is not good enough, and I cannot do the same. I'm not able to influence the same way that I can do with my first language in Hebrew. And that voice in my head telling me my English is not good enough and you are different and you will never be able to close the gap, that was not helpful.
And, it's worth noting too that this was not something that was something you could hide. It's not like, I have one foot that's bigger than the other, so I'll just wear different shoes.
That's a good one.
This is something that you lead with, and was part of who you are. How much do you think we often get stuck in thinking that a weakness makes us not enough?
Oh my gosh. Today I work with, I'm in coaching today and I can share later how I got into it. But most of us walk with that voice that we're not good enough. And or maybe a different voice that tells us why bother. And with those voices that we are mostly not aware, or as I call AwareLess, we are in a state of AwareLess. We are not aware of where we are. We keep self-sabotaging ourselves without even knowing that we walk with that voice. And I work with executives and founders of companies, and I say, hey, have you heard about what I call the saboteur voice? But there are so many names to that voice: the inner critique, the mocking spirit in spirituality. And the saboteur is one of the voices. It comes from this French word sabotage. And really that role of that voice is to tell us, stay where you are, let's keep the status quo, because here you probably will not going to fail. At least that's what we believe when we hear that voice.
So most of it is really fear.
It is kind of a fear. It's a fear of fail. It's fear of not being seen. And it's a fear that I am not able to produce what is expected for me. So why even bother? That's one of the worst ones. Let's watch Netflix, eat some ice cream. Just no one will care anyway, so don't do it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I recently read something that said the word that seems to be missing from a lot of people's vocabulary is yet. So it's, I'm not able to do this yet.
Yeah.
I don't know this yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that in mind, how did you learn to embrace what, your weakness, quote unquote, and repackage that?
So, there were a lot of little cycles, and it wasn't that I was aware of those cycles when I was there. I went through a lot of little failures, let's call them this way, and then other experiences that brought me to understand that. The first one was that I failed trying to replicate my life that I had in Israel, in the US, taking a certification exam, not passing it, taking it again, and then just surrendering and saying, okay, things are not working for me. I'm in that insanity, as Einstein says, and I need to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was too much in my doing, as I call it. I was too much in the action, and I didn't engage another part that then it wasn't like I was aware, but I just knew that those actions take me nowhere. So I need to stop. So I took a break and I started blogging. And that was the first time that I did something in a long time that was not coming from a place, I will say a very harsh or hard word or blunt word, from a place of a force, of trying to control everything to be my way. Blogging there then was like podcasting today. It was just for me playing, having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I understand now that it was also allowing me to process emotions and find that emotional outlet that I didn't really understand, that I am going through grief. I had to let go of the Noah that was in Israel and redefine myself. And I just didn't know how to do that. And I was frustrated looking at myself in the mirror and saying, how come that woman that always brought results is not able to bring results? And blogging was the first time I just let go of all those old patterns and just did something different with no expectations. So I was in that playfulness, creative space, and people started responding to me, and those connections reminded me that I'm resourceful. So that was the second part that really brought me to people asking me to coach them from reading my blog. And then women calling me at the same weekend having that ask. They were Israeli women in the US calling me all at the same weekend saying, how did you do that? We're so stuck. Can you coach us? I didn't coach them, but I am grateful for them picking up the phone and seeing something in me that I was not able to see. And that brought me to coaching school, getting certified, and still having that inner voice telling me, your English is not good enough. Probably Americans will not want to work with you as a coach. So I started with the Israelis, and they started referring me to their Americans friends, and they started working with me. So every time I took those little steps that allowed me to see something in me, or maybe others were able to see something in me, if I should say, before I was able to see in myself. And then people heard my story and they said, you're so interesting. Where can we hear you speaking? And I said, come on, people. English is my second language. I can do it easily in Hebrew. I always spoke in front of people. I was never afraid of that in English. So I went to Toastmasters. And then when I started speaking in events and conferences, people said, where is the book? And that was the first time that I was able to conquer that voice and say, that's it. I'm done with you. I am author. I wrote a book in English and we are done. Still, I want to say something that I didn't understand and someone told me along the way. I remember sitting and trying to express something and saying, I hope it makes sense because English is not my first language. And that person reached out to me after and said, no, I have to tell you something. Because of the way you speak, which is different, because of your accent, when we sit in a circle and we need to listen to you, we need to listen to you differently. And that's what makes it so special about you. And that was the beginning of that mindset shift that still, as I mentioned, there were moments along the way that I had to struggle again and again to work with that voice. But she started something in me to see that I represent different, I speak different, and then connecting with my old self. I always had a different voice. I was raised to have a different voice. That's the way I was raised at home. Always doubt the professional people, always doubt what you see, always go and check if what people tell you is true. So I always had that out of the box perspective. And then I was able to engage it all and say, okay, I'm your out of the box, I'm your out of the box coach. If you want a different voice, I'm your coach, I'm your speaker, I'm that author.
So, a couple of questions. First of all, going way back in your story, how important was it for you to make the connection with other women from Israel to know that you weren't the only one that was experiencing this kind of thing?
So they lived also in the US. So when they experienced me, I wrote about, my blog was about being an Israeli mom in the US. So my perspective, I wrote it in Hebrew, but my perspective was very interesting for people who wanted to move to the US and also that it had the same experience like me in the US and were Israelis. So I hope it answered your question.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm kind of getting at is, and you did kind of answer it, you put yourself out there and found the beginning of your tribe, so to speak. And so how much do you think that is important when we are dealing with something to put that quote unquote weakness out there and attract the people that we're going to attract, because they're seeing us deal with it and we can't possibly be the only ones?
Yeah. So I believe the reason that pivot started happening when I blogged was that for the first time I was able to deal with everything that was happening and people were able to connect with me. It wasn't like that blog was kind of like, me going through misery. It was actually a very funny blog. But from my sharing my perspective and my experiences, that brought some special connection. And when you go through a relocation or any other change in your life, by the way, positive or negative, there is something that we do unconsciously. We isolate ourselves or we feel isolation. And that was the experience I had for a long time with the relocation, meeting people along the way, but still feeling pretty much alone. And for the first time with the blogging, there was, as what you asked me, that experience of connection. People get me. People understand what I'm talking about. People finding joy in reading what I'm writing about. People are getting inspired and reaching out to tell me that they have the same experience or they're so excited to learn about my experience. And then Israeli magazines asked me to write also for them about all the things I was writing about. So it was what happens in those situations, I believe, at least that's my perspective, is that the connection reminds us that we are resourceful. And that's when things start to happen.
Interesting. And you brought up something that I had never considered, and I don't know if it just happened to be unique for your particular situation or if it's something that people do need to consider, is when you are transitioning from one thing to another, is there almost like a little bit of a grieving process?
Yes, there is. Yes. In every, so here is the deal. When we look at grief and we actually talked about it a bit before. But when we talk about grief, we always we look at it from the perspective of someone who passed away, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's mostly the perspective we bring. But if we look at the emotional process that's happening, yes, we're sad about the person that is passing away or passed away, but the main experience that we are having is, who am I going to be without that person? How am I going to redefine myself without that person? Now, if you look at any transition in your life, promotion, getting married, getting divorced, having a baby, moving from one place to another, in all those situations, the questions are the same. How do I redefine myself in this new situation? I was a single, now I'm married. I was not a mother, now I'm a caregiver. I I lived in one community, now I live in a different community. I was a team member, now I'm leading those people. I'm losing those relationships, and how can I redefine myself? So no matter if you look at work, life, whatever, positive, less positive, the experience is the same. How do I redefine myself? And I call, so there are lots of emotions and thoughts, and it's big. And that's why change is not easy. And we mostly use the word transition because change is the umbrella, but the transition is, I need to move. And part of the move is those emotions and thoughts of grief that we experience.
So, how much of it is letting go of who we are or think we are, and how much of it is repackaging who we are?
I wish I knew that answer. I wish I had. I think it's one of those $1,000,000 questions that if we knew, we would make everyone's life so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's that ability to trust that we will be able to go through that to the other side. Some people call it the tunnel of emotions and thoughts, and knowing that I think what happened to me, and that's why I was so stuck, and I will explain because it's also in the book I wrote. We have two energies, the doing energy and the being energy. And the doing is the focus on action. We all know that. And the being are the thoughts and emotions and fears and hopes and mindset. And in the move, I focused on the doing, on the actions that always worked for me. But I didn't engage what I felt and what I thought and the mindset and the fears. I tried to ignore that and pass that. And mostly when we go through change, we kind of like, I'm just going to, push the action. I'm just going to focus on action, and I'm going to ignore everything else. And when we do that, we make the process longer. So we stay longer in that tunnel without realizing that. And my recommendation, even though it sucks, stay with the being part, stay with the emotions and the thoughts, and find your way to do that. Work with a coach. When I moved the second time from New York to North Carolina, where we live, I started with just taking me and the kids to walks around lakes. And there are lots of lakes. So we started with the neighborhood lake, and then we moved to a bigger lake and a bigger lake. And inspired by your trees, I find that in nature, it's a creative space for us to process our emotions and our thoughts and walk through what we need to go through. So there are different ways to go through that. And mostly not a lot is happening there. There is not a lot of action. And that's why I was stuck for 5 years, because I didn't give myself time to process. And when you learn to process, there is not a lot of action, but you're doing that work, that you will be able to get into the other side where action start happening. And by the way, it's very interesting. The same with change and transition is with the start. There is that starting point. I can put you there, but you need to do the work internally to move into that beginning, to move from that transition. I am in that messy space to beginning. And that again, there is standing on the line, but doing the work internally that I can begin.
So let's say we have something about ourselves that we see as a weakness that is keeping us from moving forward. Without going into a whole process, how do we begin to change that?
So, two thoughts about that. First, there are some weaknesses. In when I work with clients, I say there are some weaknesses that maybe we don't need to pay attention to them. It's fine. As we say, they are the strengths that help the sail to sail to make the boat sail, right? That it keeps moving. And there are some little holes that if we all the time stick our fingers in it, we get away from the boat keep sailing. But those holes don't make the boat sink. So maybe it's a waste of time paying attention to those weaknesses. So that's first. Not every weakness we need to deal with. And sometimes we can choose that right now it's a weakness and that's okay. And I can see many times that part of the burden we walk with is that we need to fix everything. And sometimes giving ourselves that permission and saying, no, this is okay. I don't want to work on that relationship. I don't want to fix that weakness in me. And I give myself permission to keep it this way. That brings peace, just making that choice. And it could be, as you say, I don't want to fix it now. It can wait for later. And that's fine too. But we made that choice so we can feel aligned with it. So many times it's just giving ourselves the permission not to touch it at all, or not to touch it now and deal with it later. Even with business, we know we can't do everything now. So it could be yes, but not now. So that's one thing. Some weaknesses, we need to do the work and see if we can find a new frame, a new perspective to look at it. Sometimes it's possible. Sometimes it takes some years. Finding the people, reading the book, working with a coach or a mentor or your manager, until something clicks. For me, it was that woman who just said, we listen to you differently, and actually there is magic in it. And it allowed me to start exploring that and realizing that even in Israel, I many times felt different. So maybe there is some theme there that I can look at and work from there and look at possibilities. Can we force that?
Which brings up another interesting point. How do we, or is there a way that we can take a look at our quote unquote weakness and determine, is it really a weakness or is it just something that makes us unique?
I believe that again, it's not an easy, quick answer, and I wish I had that answer. There are some areas that we need to struggle with ourselves to get to the other side and say, this is something I need to work on. And mostly it's very hard. I call it the deer effect. It's, like when you drive and that deer is bumping into your car. Sometimes it's hard to do it alone. You need to have that conversation with another person telling you, hey, you need to work on that. And that's when we understand that there is a gap there that we need to work, and we are willing to do that work. Sometimes people will say, hey, you need to work on it. And you will look at it and say, no, I'm not. So for example, I just finished working with a client. And one of the things I love that when he came and he said, I got that feedback, I could see that even though it was a struggle to work on that area, there was that deep connection that he said, if I make other people miserable, I need to do that work. So maybe my answer to you, because I'm sorry, I'm not a recipe person, but maybe the answer is find the purpose behind. If there is no purpose behind, maybe it's not the time yet to put the effort. But if there is a purpose behind that, then there is the willingness and the want to show up to make things different.
Mm. What if it's a case like yours where it's something that we really can't change? If it's an accent that we have or something like that,
many people told me, go to an accent coach and fix that. And I didn't like this idea, because something in me, when you own a value like authenticity, and that's something I am about, integrity and honesty and authenticity, and that's a value for me. So I was not able to say I'm going to show up as someone different just to make others feel that I need to look like them, and by the way, when I wrote the book, I chose an editor that will keep my voice, my special voice, in the words, in the way I wrote it, in the way I crafted my book. I had a few people trying, along the years, because again, the story about my English, I don't write good enough, well enough, polished enough, whatever. I brought a few people to edit blog posts that I wrote in English, and I couldn't stand the way they took my words and made it their own. There was not a uniqueness me in the way they wrote it. It was just another thing with no uniqueness there. And it was more important to me to work with someone that will take my words, and when I read them, I will not know if I edit it or that editor edited. And I think this is a mastery, what that person did with my book. So yes, I went through a lot of struggle, but when I was willing to own that, yes, my accent will always stay me. I will still being asked again and again, where are you from? And be tired from those questions sometimes. And still, it's part of my uniqueness and who I am. And in the end, what I do is the business of Noa.
So at the end of it all, when we decide that this thing that we thought was a weakness really isn't, and we embrace it, do we then lead with that? How often do you lead with what makes you different?
Here is what I'm going to say. I think that it came from what we just finished talking about. So I'm going to break the rules of the question a bit. When I work with people that have some health issues, we have that fight with our body, that thing that we makes us upset because physically we don't feel well, right? One of the works I sometimes do with people in those areas is to find peace. Have a conversation with that area and ask them, why are you angry with me? Or why are you making me feel this way? Or having those really open conversation with that part in us that makes us feel not the way we want to. And my answer to you is I believe that those weaknesses are those places that we need to learn how to first have a conversation and say, hey, what makes you, or what makes me not having you as part of me? What's the resistance about? What makes me not welcome you until I am willing to do that work and welcome that part into me, whether if it's physical or something else like my accent or, being from a different country or whatever it is, that weakness that I have, that until I'm willing to find that peace with that part in me, whether it's physical or weakness as we talk today, we're going to stay restless. And it's not easy to lead when there is no peace within. peace within comes with the experience of I'm welcoming everything inside me, and if there is something that is hard for me, I'm welcoming, keep working on that, because it never stops. So it's that permission to keep working on what I need to, and be okay with that, rather than fixing myself all the time. I hope it makes sense, that distinction. And then I can lead, because I come from a place of alignment. So a lot of times when I do the work is really to understand, what do I need to do to have that experience, that internally I am aligned with myself, with my values, with my strengths, with those weaknesses, and welcome them, with relationships that I don't want to repair, and I choose not to repair them, at least not now. And with that, bringing my whole self into the leadership, and people see someone that is authentic or walk with integrity.
Love that. Thank you so much for all of that. And so with that, I'm just going to wrap this up. So you've given us a lot of great advice. What was the best advice you were ever given?
I'm going to go back to my father. He would love that. So I'm going to, he always say, tell that your father said that. So I'm going to give him that at the age of 80. He always said, always question the professionals, the smart people. Always, when they say something, go and check it out. Doesn't mean that if they have the title, it means that they know everything. I learned that in so many different ways. Not the doctors, not the professors, not whatever it is, the coaches, whatever it is. It's not easy, but it's what made me that special Noa, that able to sit with clients and see things out of the box. Because when we are stuck with the solution, I always say, because I find that we're not stuck with a problem, we're stuck with the solution. And when we come to the process stuck with the solution, we put all our energy on that. This is the weakness that makes me stuck, if we talk about weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And I say, what if it's something else? What if we can see a different solution to your problem? Mm-hmm. What would be possible then? And what would be possible if there will be at least 10 more solutions to look at your problem? What would be possible then? So I find there is a lot of freedom. It's not easy to live with that mindset, but there is also a lot of freedom in this process to find your way in this world.
So then next one is, let us know one thing on your bucket list.
On my bucket list, I really, 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 really want to visit New Zealand. Really want to be there. Yeah.
Pretty. Okay, when the toy companies finally get around to making an action figure of you, what 2 accessories will it come with?
Oh my gosh. That's when I need a moment to think. Accessory of me. Probably some baking or cooking spoon. I love cooking.
And last one, where do people find you?
My website. Just go to my website, Noa, N-O-A, there is no H there. So Noa Ronen Coaching, noaronencoaching.com, or everywhere on social media, I'm the same, Noa R Coach. So just get connected. Let's start there. Connection. Right now, it's the most important thing, I believe.
Perfect. And I will put Noa's contact information in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here, Noa.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I love the background of your trees. It's just so inspirational talking with you. And I have the birds in the background. So
well, thank
you so much. It was a lovely experience. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Once again, I'm Marlana Semenza, photographer and visual strategist. Please comment, like, or share this episode. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. For more information on how I can help you create your iconic image, visit marlanasemenza.com.